I am Leonard Caldwell, 70 years old, and I am currently in the process of dismantling my entire family. A few days ago, I sat in my lawyer's office as my wife Maureen and my son Garrett realized the trap I had set. Garrett's voice was shaking. "You can't do this. This is our home." My wife just stared, her face white with shock. "You're a monster, Leonard." I simply looked at the legal documents on the table. "You plan to have me declared mentally incompetent and steal my entire estate. I'm just taking back what's mine. You said the best thing I could do was disappear. Congratulations. You got your wish." It all started 4 days ago. 4 days back, I was still nothing more than Leonard Caldwell, the retired fool, the oblivious old man. I was riding in the passenger seat of our Mercedes, the one I paid for every last cent of it. My wife Maureen had the wheel, her knuckles gone white against it. She wasn't so much as glancing my way. "Welcome to Dadrevenge. I'm glad you're here for this one, because this story is one I've carried with me for a long time. Before we go any further, drop a quick comment and let me know, is this your first time joining us? Or have you been here a while? I'd genuinely love to know. And one thing worth saying up front, some details in this story have been shaped for the telling, and any resemblance to specific real people or events is entirely coincidental. What matters is the truth at the center of it. She was fixed on the highway ahead, as if she could stare the traffic out of existence. "He needs it, Leonard. $100,000. I let out a long sigh. This was the 5th time she'd brought it up, and it was only Tuesday. "Maureen," I said, the weariness plain in my voice. "We've already been through this. The answer is no." "Through it," she snapped back. The turn signal clicked sharp and angry, matching her mood exactly. "You sat me down in that leather armchair and talked at me like I was a child." I turned to look out at the city skyline, the city I had a hand in shaping. "I worked 45 years, Maureen, 45 years in construction. I didn't walk into some corner office on day one. I started mixing concrete by hand in the pouring rain. I built everything I have out of mud, sweat, and busted deals. I am not, I repeat, not pouring $100,000 into whatever next-gen tech mirage Garrett is chasing this week. It's not a mirage." She slapped the steering wheel with her open palm. "It's an investment. He laid it all out for you. It's blockchain logistics." He couldn't even explain the business model. I kept my voice level, but just barely. "He threw a lot of buzzwords at us, Maureen. That's what con artists do. Businessmen don't operate that way. He is 42 years old. He has an MBA, one I paid for. It is long past time he carried his own weight." Then she said it, the sentence that set everything in motion. "You're a clueless old man, Leonard." Pure contempt soaked every word. "You're a relic, a fossil. You know bricks and steel. You don't live in the digital world. This opportunity won't wait, and you're too slow and too tight to see it. He needs the money now." Tight. The word just floated there in the air of that luxury car. Cheap. The heat rose in my chest, thick and burning. I paid tuition at the private university he barely scraped through. I covered the down payment on his first condo in Buckhead. I wrote the check for his $300,000 wedding to Tara, a woman who eyes me like something she stepped in. I've handed that boy everything, Maureen. This isn't about money. It's about shielding him and us from his own lousy judgment." Maureen let out a scoff, cutting and dismissive, the kind that burrows under your skin. "Protecting your hoarding. You're crouched over your pile of gold like some dragon terrified to let a single coin go. What good is all that wealth if you won't use it for your only son when he actually needs you? Trouble is exactly what this is," I shot back. "This doesn't feel like opportunity. It smells like desperation. Giving him help means handing him a ladder, Maureen. What you're describing is tossing him a pillow while he's falling off a cliff." I want a business plan. I want projections. I want to sit across from his partners. There's no time, she nearly shrieked, and I caught a bead of sweat on her upper lip. That wasn't just anger. That was panic. The deadline is today. If he can't lock down the funding today, the whole deal collapses. You're doing this to spite him, to control him. I am doing this, I said, my voice dropping to the low flat register I used to reserve for foremen who tried to lie to my face. Because it is my money I earned, and the answer is no. The car lurched without warning. Maureen stamped on the brakes, and I was thrown hard into the seatbelt. We screamed to a stop on the gravel shoulder. What in God's name are you doing, Maureen? She turned to face me, and what I saw in her eyes wasn't anger anymore. It was cold, empty. I asked you for help. You said no, so get out. My wife's face had gone somewhere I didn't recognize. The gracious mask she wore at her charity luncheons had vanished, and in its place was something raw and ugly. Useless, she screamed, her voice breaking apart. If you won't help your son, you are just as useless as your father was. That landed below the belt. My father, Harold Caldwell, died with calluses worn deep into his hands and his dignity fully intact. He never had much to his name, but he was a lion of a man. How dare she? Before I could form a single word, the car was already fishtailing on the gravel, lurching to a violent stop. The jolt knocked the breath clean out of me. What in God's name are you doing, Maureen? You'll get us both killed. She said nothing. She pressed the button to unlock the doors, then turned to me, and those eyes, they weren't angry anymore. They were flat, dead, like two stones polished smooth. Get out. I, Leonard Caldwell, 70 years old, stared at the woman I had been married to for 46 years. I was sure I'd misheard her. What did you say? Get out. She bit off each word. I am done talking to you. Done trying to reason with you. If you won't help your family, you have no place in this family. I think I actually laughed. A short, hard sound. You're joking. We are on the side of the I-285 perimeter. This is insane. Could stop this right now. I am not joking. She reached across me, yanked the handle, and shoved the passenger door wide open. The thunder of semis blasting past at 80 miles an hour poured into the car. Get out, Leonard, now. I sat there frozen. This was not the woman I had married. She was a stranger. She watched me hesitate. With a snarl, she unclicked her seatbelt, leaned across, and snatched the canvas travel bag I kept for emergencies from down by my feet. She hurled it out onto the weeds at the roadside. Maureen! I finally yelled, the reality of it crashing over me. I stumbled out to grab the bag. The wind tore at my coat. I turned back. Maureen, my wallet. My phone. They're in the center console. She looked over at the console. She could see the wallet. She could see the phone sitting right there. Then she looked back at me, and a small, terrible smile crept across her mouth. If you won't give any money, Leonard, she hissed, barely audible over the roar of passing trucks. Then you don't need a wallet. She slammed the door. The locks thunked into place. Maureen, don't you dare! She never looked at me again. She floored it. The tires flung gravel across my legs as the Mercedes slipped back into traffic and dissolved into the midday glare. I stood there alone. My heart was hammering so hard, I thought something would give way. My bag was in my hand, a change of clothes and a toothbrush, that's all it held. I went through my pockets. Empty. Just my keys. No wallet. No phone. Not a dollar to my name. I was 70 years old, stranded on the shoulder of a Georgia tollway, completely cut off. I tried flagging down passing cars. Nobody stopped. A 70-year-old man standing on the roadside looks like trouble. Looks like a vagrant. I must have been out there a good 20 minutes. Cold panic was beginning to take hold. Real cold panic. How was I going to get home? How was I going to reach anyone? That's when I spotted it. Not just a car, an artifact. A vintage Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow Black, and gleaming like still water, eased off the highway and glided to a stop about 10 feet ahead of me. The engine was barely a whisper. The driver's door swung open, and a man in an immaculate Navy chauffeur's uniform stepped out tall, composed, the sort of man who looked like he hadn't smiled since 1984. He walked not toward me but straight to the rear passenger door and pulled it open. He stood there holding it, waiting. I didn't know what to make of it. Was this for me? I took one uncertain step forward, and then a voice came from the shadowed interior. A woman's voice, old, but carrying an authority that didn't request, it commanded. "Theodore," the voice clipped. "You're late for your interview. Get in." I went still. My name is not Theodore. I glanced at the driver. His face gave nothing away. He gestured toward the open door with a short, impatient motion. I had a choice to make. Stay on the shoulder of the highway penniless, waiting for a state trooper to roll up, or get in the car. I looked down the road where Maureen had vanished. I looked at that open door. I'm sorry I was delayed," I said, my voice rough. I straightened my coat, picked up my bag, and Leonard Caldwell, stepped into the back of a stranger's car, pretending to be Theodore. I had no idea I wasn't simply accepting a ride. I was stepping into a reckoning. The heavy door closed with a solid, definitive thump, sealing me in. The quiet was total. The car didn't rumble the way my Mercedes did. It glided smooth, as though the road beneath us had gone soft. Old leather and fine wood polish filled the air around me. I settled into the plush velvet seat, my worn duffel bag looking like a piece of junk against the spotless floor. Edmund got in, and the car pulled away. We merged onto the highway without a sound from the engine, just the soft murmur of tires on pavement. "You look disheveled, Theodore." The old woman's voice cut right through the quiet. She was seated across from me in a rear-facing seat, tiny and almost swallowed by the car's interior. Yet her presence somehow filled every inch of it. Her hands, gnarled with age but heavy with large, ornate rings, rested on the polished head of a cane. Dark glasses hid her eyes. "I trust your personal difficulties will not affect your professional assessment," she continued. I had to think on my feet. This Theodore was expected. He was late. He was a mess. "My apologies, madam," I said, pulling my voice into something that sounded composed. "I had a minor roadside incident, a flat tire. It was dealt with, and I can assure you it won't be an issue." I caught Edmund's gaze in the rearview mirror. Sharp, calculating. He held it for a full 3 seconds. He knew. He had to know. He'd seen me standing there, abandoned on the shoulder, not crouched over any flat tire. A cold shiver moved up my spine. This was a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake. "A flat tire," the old woman Dorothea repeated, her lips pressed together. "How inconvenient. But you are here now. My sources tell me you are the best at identifying structural weaknesses. What is your view on the new zoning proposals for Midtown?" I was completely at sea. What proposals? Who was Theodore? But then the phrase "structural weaknesses" landed on me like a key turning in a lock. That was the language of my entire life. I leaned forward. "Madam," I began, letting my real voice, the voice of Leonard Caldwell the builder, take the wheel. "The Midtown proposals are a fantasy propped up on compromised inspections. They're trying to push permits through for high-density residential on ground that was never properly remediated. I've looked at the soil reports. I know the contractors they're using. You stack anything above 12 stories on that landfill, and you're not putting up apartments. You're raising a tomb. I can smell a bad foundation from a mile away. A long silence followed. Dorothea's head tilted slightly, as if tuning in to a distant signal. Edmund's eyes moved back to me in the mirror this time. Less suspicious, more curious. Dorothea nodded, slow and deliberate. And what of personnel management, Theodore? How do you deal with internal decay, employees who are not what they appear to be? The question hit me like a fist. I thought of Garrett. I thought of Maureen. When I spoke, my voice came out harder than I meant it to. Madam, in my experience, internal decay is a cancer. You don't sit down and negotiate with it. You don't placate it. You don't wait around hoping it corrects itself. You excise it, cleanly and without flinching. I leaned in my fury at my own family feeding the words. You find the weakness. You find the rot. You drag it into the light and you cut it out before it brings the whole structure down. You don't spare it because it was part of the original build. You save the structure from it. Another long silence. Dorothea's fingers tapped on the head of the cane. 1, 2, 3. A harsh philosophy. Theodore, she said, her voice giving nothing away. It's the only philosophy that keeps the building standing, madam, I replied. Edmund's eyes found mine in the mirror again. The skepticism had left them entirely replaced by a deep, unsettling focus. He knew I wasn't Theodore, but he seemed far more interested in who I actually was. The Rolls-Royce slowed, turning from the main road onto a private drive. Massive wrought iron gates, the kind I used to fabricate for clients out in Roswell, swung open without a sound. We approached a mansion that belonged more to a European capital than to this city. I had kept the conversation alive. I had used my own truth to construct a convincing lie. But as the house rose up in front of me, I had no way of knowing whether I'd just passed a test or walked headlong into something far more dangerous. The Rolls-Royce eased to a stop on a cobblestone drive worn smooth with age. The mansion was even more imposing up close, a fortress of limestone and dark slate that seemed to loom over you with intent. Edmund climbed out, came to my door, and opened it. No offered hand. Just waiting. Come, Theodore. Dorothea's voice carried from inside. We are late. I stepped out my old duffel bag, feeling all the more ridiculous in these surroundings. Edmund led the way up a sweeping staircase spine as rigid as rebar. Not a word. The heavy oak doors opened on their own as we reached them, ghost quiet, almost certainly operated by some unseen security system. The inside was not a home. It was a museum. The floors were pale limestone veined with gray. A chandelier the size of a small boat hung 3 stories above us. I followed Edmund across the vast entry hall, our footsteps ringing out in the emptiness. He paused before a set of tall mahogany doors and knocked once. Enter. Dorothea's voice came from within. Edmund opened the doors and stepped aside for me to pass. The room was dim, heavy curtains drawn tight against the afternoon light. The only illumination came from a bronze-shaded lamp on a massive desk planted at the center of the room. Dorothea Langford sat behind it, perfectly still, hands still folded over her cane. Wait here. Edmund's voice was a low rumble. He moved to the desk, bent down, and murmured something close to her ear. I couldn't make out the words. Dorothea gave one sharp, bird-like nod. Edmund, you may leave us, she said. The tall chauffeur straightened, turned, and walked past me. At the door, he stopped for just a beat and looked back at me. His face was unreadable as stone. Then he was gone, the heavy doors closing behind him with a soft, final click. I was alone in the dark with a blind 90-year-old woman who held all the cards. The silence stretched out. I could hear the steady ticking of a tall case clock in the corner. I cleared my throat, about to speak, about to keep the Theodore performance going. "And Leonard Caldwell," she said, her voice slicing through the gloom, "you can stop pretending." My blood went cold. My heart seized. I couldn't have heard that correctly. I beg your pardon, madam. My name is... Your name is Leonard Caldwell. You are 70 years old. You reside in Alpharetta. Your wife Maureen put you out of her Mercedes on the shoulder of the I-285 perimeter approximately 45 minutes ago. You are not Theodore. Theodore is a 60-year-old analyst from Tennessee who is at this moment receiving my sincerest apologies and a very generous check for his inconvenience. Do you have anything to add, Mr. Caldwell? I physically staggered backward as if she'd shoved me. My duffel bag slipped from my fingers and landed on the Persian rug with a dull thud. How do you know that the car, Edmund, were you following me? She laughed. It wasn't a warm sound, dry like old leaves crumbling. Following you, don't flatter yourself. I have far better uses for my time than tracking the spoiled son of a great man. Edmund, she said, tapping her cane against the floor, is loyal. He spotted you on the shoulder. He recognized the Mercedes. He recognized her driving away. And he recognized you from the files. Files? What files? The files I have maintained on every significant construction family in this city for the past 60 years. But the files weren't even necessary. I knew who you were the moment you opened your mouth. This was impossible. I was just someone who'd climbed into the wrong car. Not Theodore. Not anyone she should have known. She had known from the very beginning. The Theodore name was a test. A trap. How? I whispered, my voice barely holding together. How could you possibly know me? Dorothea Langford leaned forward, and the lamplight caught the sharp line of her jaw. I may be blind, Mr. Caldwell, but I am not deaf, and my memory has never failed me. I would know that voice anywhere, even across 50 years. 50 years, I have never met you in my life. No, you haven't, she said. But your father did. I was present at a contentious bid meeting in 1972. Your father, Harold Caldwell, was there. He was my fiercest rival, the only honest builder in this entire God-forsaken city. A young, arrogant city councilman tried to shut him down, to humiliate him in front of the room. And your father stood up and spoke. He had a voice like yours, not in its sound, but in its weight and its soul. A voice that understood how to build things and how to bring them down. I heard that same structural integrity in your voice the second you started lying about soil reports. She paused, her head tilting again, drawn back to a memory I had no window into. Your father, Harold, he was the greatest man I ever knew, and I despised him for it. He beat me on the Georgia World Congress Center contract. He beat me on the library contract. Not because he had more money. He didn't. But because he was better. He was honest. He was a lion. She leaned back into the shadows. I watched his legacy. I watched his lion son you grow up and become a house cat. I watched you hand your company, your father's life's work, over to your worthless son, Garrett. I watched you let your greedy wife, Maureen, lead you around by the nose. Harold Caldwell would be ashamed of you. The blood drained from my face. This strange, blind old woman knew everything. Not just my name. She knew my family. She knew where I was soft. Why, I finally got out. Why pull me off the highway? Why bring me into this house? Just to say this to me. Because, she said, her voice dropping. I also saw Maureen and Garrett at my bank last week, Leonard. They were behind closed doors with the high-risk accounts manager. And I can tell you something you do not know. She leaned forward one last time, her voice barely above a whisper, low and dangerous, cold enough to raise the hair on my arms. They didn't look like investors. They looked like prey. They looked terrified. Maureen didn't put you out on that highway because you refused to hand over $100,000. She did it because she is desperate, and whatever they have set in motion, it is far, far worse than anything you are imagining. I stepped back, my mind spinning. Worse? What are you talking about? What files? This is madness. You don't know my family. I know men. Dorothea's voice was sharp as broken glass. And I knew your father. Harold Caldwell was a lion. He built his half of this city on backbone and his word alone. He never retreated from a fight. He certainly never let anyone disrespect him. She paused, and I could feel her sightless gaze cutting straight through me. I watched you, Leonard. I watched you inherit that backbone and let it go soft. You handed your company, your father's legacy, to that useless boy of yours like it was a gift. You allowed your wife to turn you into her personal treasury. You are not a lion. You are a doormat. And you just got put out on the side of your own highway. The shame landed harder than the wind out there on the shoulder. She was right. My whole life I had poured everything into my family, trying to be the generous father, the steady provider. And in doing all that, I had lost the man my father had shaped me to be. But I don't understand, I said, lowering myself into the leather chair across from her desk. Garrett just needs capital for an investment. Maureen is just angry. Angry. Dorothea laughed again, that same dry, unsettling sound. Do you think what Edmund saw on her face when she sped away was anger? That was panic. Leonard, I was at my bank last week. The main branch downtown. Who do I find in the private wealth management wing being escorted by security? Your wife. And your son. My stomach knotted. They bank there. What of it? They weren't sitting with a teller, you fool, she snapped. They were inside a glass conference room with Hale Drummond. Drummond is not a financial planner. He is the vice president of high-risk accounts. He is the man the bank deploys when a client is on the edge of defaulting on $500,000. He's the one they send to liquidate assets before the authorities get involved. No, I whispered. That's not possible. Garrett wouldn't. You're a builder, Leonard. Use your head. They looked desperate. They looked like gamblers who had bet the house on a bad hand and knew it. Your refusal of the $100,000 wasn't the root of any of this. It was just an obstacle that got in their way. She leaned forward, dropping her voice so low I had to strain to catch the words. Let me be perfectly plain, because you appear to be a very slow man. Maureen did not put you out of that car to punish you. She put you out because she needed you gone. She needed you with no phone, no money, and no ability to interfere with what she and Garrett had to do today. She needed you to vanish. The words struck me like something physical. Today. The deadline Garrett had mentioned. They weren't trying to extract money from me. They were trying to keep me from seeing what they were already doing. I looked down at my hands, my old calloused hands. I had nothing. No phone. No wallet. I was stranded. I don't know what to do, I admitted. Of course you don't. You're still in shock. She straightened. First, you will stop looking like a vagrant. Edmund will take you to the Piedmont Reserve Club. It is my private hotel. You will have a suite. You will eat. She opened a drawer in the desk and produced a small, slim box. And you will use this. It is a new phone. Clean. Encrypted. The only contacts in it are mine, Edmund's, and my personal attorney, Mr. Daly. Your family has no knowledge this number exists." "Why?" I asked, my voice stripped bare. "Why are you doing this? You said my father was your rival." Dorothea's face softened for just a moment. "Your father respected me, and I respected him. What your wife and son are doing it is a stain on his legacy. I will not sit by and watch Harold Caldwell's memory dragged through the mud by a pair of greedy, pathetic amateurs. Now take the phone, Leonard. Your war has just begun." The Piedmont Reserve Club was not a hotel. It was a tomb built from old money and silence. Edmund led me to a suite larger than the entire ground floor of my house. Dark wood, brass fixtures, heavy velvet curtains throughout. He set my duffel bag on the luggage rack, where it sat like a stray dog that had wandered into a palace. "Mrs. Langford has arranged for all your meals and incidentals to be charged to her account. The phone is on the desk, fully charged." He regarded me for a moment with that same unreadable face. "Good luck, Mr. Caldwell." Then he was gone. I stood alone in that enormous room. I crossed to the desk and picked up the phone Dorothea had given me, sleek, black, cold in my palm. I powered it on. 3 contacts, Edmund, Dorothea, Daly. That was the whole list. I sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, the mattress so firm it might as well have been stone. Dorothea's words circled the room with me. They looked like desperate gamblers. She needed you gone. It was like a key finding a lock that had rusted shut for years. Suddenly, the last 6 months of my life began running back through my mind. But the picture looked different now. Darker. I remembered about 3 weeks ago coming into the kitchen late at night for a glass of water. Maureen and Garrett were hunched over the kitchen island, their voices low and urgent. The moment I walked in, they both flinched. Maureen flipped her phone face down on the counter instantly. "Dad." Garrett said, his voice a note too high, too easy. "You're up late. Just going over some family finances with Mom." Maureen had stared at me, her face drained of color. "Go back to bed, Leonard," she'd said, forcing a smile. "We're almost finished. Don't worry your head about it." I'd felt a flicker of irritation. My finances, and I'm being told not to worry my head. But I was tired. I let it go and went back to bed. Now I could see it plainly for what it was. Not a private conversation, a conspiracy. Then I thought of Tara, my daughter-in-law. 2 months back at Sunday dinner, she had been complaining. Garrett worked so hard, she'd said, but they were barely keeping their heads above water. "This economy, Leonard." She'd sighed. "We're having to tighten our belts. I had to cancel our trip to Park City." I remembered thinking something was off. Garrett held a senior post at a major financial firm. His salary ran well above $300,000 a year. "What kind of belt-tightening forces you to scrap a ski trip?" I wrote it off as theater fishing for a handout. But now high-risk accounts default. Were they sinking because Garrett had been funneling their money into a hole with no bottom, and then the one that turned my stomach completely over? About 4 months ago, Maureen came to me carrying a stack of documents. It was just after my 70th birthday. "Leonard, darling," she'd said, settling beside me on the sofa, her hand on my knee. "We need to simplify things for the kids. We should liquidate some of the real estate holdings, the ones you own outright, and move that capital into a more flexible trust. Just, for estate planning." It was the plausible lie wrapped in perfect reasonableness. I had gone through the papers. It meant selling 3 commercial properties I'd built back in the 80s, properties that were my bedrock. "I'm not sure about this, Maureen," I'd said. "They're solid assets. They produce steady income. Why sell?" She got short with me. "Oh, Leonard, you're so sentimental. They're just bricks and mortar. It's too complicated for Garrett to manage if something happens to us. This is cleaner. Please just sign. I refused. I told her I would speak with my own lawyer, not hers, when I was good and ready. She'd been furious. Didn't speak to me for a solid week. At the time, I'd written it off as a typical argument about money, but I could see it now for what it was. It wasn't estate planning. It was a grab. She wasn't making arrangements for after I was gone. She was trying to strip away everything I'd built while I was still standing. I got up from the bed, my hands trembling. Dorothea was right. This had never been about $100,000. This was about everything, and they had been working at it for months. I picked up the new phone. I had to know. I had to know what they were doing at that very moment. I called Maureen's number. I stared at her name on the clean screen. My thumb hung over the button. My pulse was hammering. What if she answered? What would I even say? I pressed it. 1 ring, 2 rings, then click. Her voice, but just the recording. You've reached Maureen. I'm dreadfully busy at the moment. Please leave a message, and I'll return your call when I can. Dreadfully busy. Busy with what? Busy dismantling my accounts. Busy sitting across from Hale Drummond in that glass conference room. I ended the call without a word. My hand was shaking. All right, I'd try Garrett. He was my son. He couldn't. I dialed from memory without even glancing at the phone. It rang and rang and rang, straight to voicemail. Why, hey, it's Garrett. You know what to do. Leave it at the beep. He sounded so easy, so unbothered, the successful, carefree son I had always wanted to believe existed. The son I had paid to create. A cold dread settled deep in my gut. Dorothea was right. They needed me gone. This was no accidental blow-up. This was a coordinated move, both of them deliberately unreachable. But they had forgotten someone. Tara, my daughter-in-law, the one who'd been moaning about tightening her belt. If Garrett was drowning financially, she'd be in a panic. And panicking people make mistakes. I found her number and pressed call. It picked up on the very first ring so fast she must have had the phone already in her hand. Hello? Her voice was breathless and clipped. Tara, it's Leonard. It's Dad. The silence on the other end was absolute. Then I caught a sharp intake of breath, a muffled sound like she had pressed the receiver to her chest and was whispering frantically to someone else in the room. It's him. It's the old man. I heard it clearly. The old man. Not Dad. She came back on the line, her voice jumping into a performance of breathless, high-pitched alarm. Dad! Oh my God! Dad, where are you? Are you all right? We've been worried sick. Mom and Garrett are out looking for you right now. Mom was beside herself. She said you two had a little argument and you just walked off. The lies. They fell out so easily, so smoothly. Worried sick. Out looking for me. My real phone, still sitting in the center console of that Mercedes, must have been ringing non-stop with all their frantic, concerned calls, right? I decided to go along with it. I needed more. I'm fine, Tara, I said, putting a tremor into my voice, making myself sound old and rattled and worn out. I'm so sorry. I just got confused. I'm at an old friend's place. Ned's. Ned Whitlow. I took a cab. I used the name of a man who had been in the ground for 10 years. If she'd been thinking clearly, she would have known I was lying. But she wasn't thinking clearly. She was desperate. Ned's, oh, thank God. Thank God you're safe. She gushed. The relief was real, but it had nothing to do with caring whether I was safe. It was relief that she had a location. That's wonderful, Dad. Listen, you stay right there. Don't move. I'm going to call Mom and Garrett this second and let them know. They'll be so relieved. They'll probably come right over to get you. What's Ned's address? There it was. The hook. Oh, I said, letting my voice go flustered. No, no, dear. Don't you trouble yourself. I'm going to rest here tonight. I'm so embarrassed. I've caused such a fuss. Just tell Maureen I'm safe. Tell her I'll call her tomorrow. I just need to sleep. Another pause. More muffled whispering. She clearly wasn't alone. Oh, okay, Dad. If you're sure. She sounded thrown. My answer hadn't fit the script she was working from. Yes, dear, I'm sure. I'm just so tired. Don't worry yourself about a thing. I'll talk to you all tomorrow. Okay. Okay, Dad. Just you rest. We're just so glad you're okay. She hung up so fast the line cut before I could even lower the phone. I set it down. My hands were perfectly still now. The tremor was gone. The cold dread had hardened into cold certainty. Tara's lies were pitiful. Worried sick, but neither of them answered my calls. Out looking for me, but Maureen's phone was switched off. And the most brazen lie of all, Mom was beside herself. I knew my wife. If Maureen had genuinely felt any guilt after that fight, if she truly believed a 70-year-old man was wandering lost somewhere, she would not be out driving around. She would have called the police. She would have called the hospitals. She would have called everyone she knew. But she hadn't done any of that. Because she already knew exactly where I was. She knew I was on the shoulder of the I-285 perimeter. She knew I had no phone, no money, no way to reach anyone. She hadn't called the police because she was counting on me being helpless. She was counting on me being gone. My disappearance wasn't a complication in their plan. It was a feature of it. I looked at the third name on the phone. Daly, Dorothea's lawyer. I pressed the button. It was time to stop being the man this had happened to. It was time to find out exactly what my family was doing. The fake high-pitched alarm in Tara's voice still rang in my ears. We've been worried sick. It was revolting. They weren't worried. They were managing me. They thought I was a disoriented old man, lost and frightened, waiting to be collected. They had no idea that by putting me out of that car, Maureen had done the one thing she would come to regret. She had finally forced me to open my eyes. My hands were steady. The adrenaline had burned clean and cold through me. I looked at that third name on the phone. Daly. A man answered immediately, crisp, professional. Mr. Daly, I said, my voice low and even. My name is Leonard Caldwell. Mrs. Langford introduced us by proxy. I'm calling from the phone she provided. Mr. Caldwell. No surprise in his voice. He'd been expecting this. Mrs. Langford briefed me. I'm entirely at your disposal. What do you need? I didn't waste a breath. I need you to freeze every joint asset I share with my wife, Maureen Caldwell. Checking, savings, brokerage accounts, lines of credit, all of it, immediately. I have reason to believe she and my son Garrett are attempting fraudulent withdrawals as we speak. So none understood, Daly said. No hesitation. I have your signed authorization from Mrs. Langford's files. I'll execute the freeze on all known accounts at once. I'll also flag your credit bureaus against any new lines being opened in your name. Anything else? Yes. I said Dorothea's warning about the bank sharp in my mind. My wife and son were seen at the main branch in a meeting with Hale Drummond in high-risk accounts. I need to know why. I need to know what they've already moved. I know Drummond, Daly replied. His voice was grim. I'll make the call. Sit tight, Mr. Caldwell. I'll reach you back on this number within the hour. The line went dead. 1 hour. I stood and walked to the window. The suite looked out over a manicured garden. It was peaceful. It was a lie. My whole life had been this garden, immaculate on the surface, kept that way by things I had chosen not to look at too closely. I moved around the room. I kept thinking about the $100,000. It was such a particular number. Why make a scene over that in the car if something much larger was already in motion? Was it a test to see if I was paying attention, or was it a distraction? A small fire lit to keep my eyes off the house while they burned it down from the inside. I thought about Maureen, 46 years. Had any of it been real, I couldn't make myself believe it was all false. The early years, the struggle raising the children, building something from nothing, that had been real. But the woman who had looked at me with those flat, dead eyes and told me I didn't need a wallet, that was someone else. She had been changed by Garrett, by his greed, by his weakness. Or had she been the one who changed him? The room's silence pressed down on me like something physical. I stared at my duffel bag. My old life stuffed inside cheap nylon. Pathetic. Dorothea had been right. I had made myself a doormat. I had swallowed every slight, absorbed every insult, all in the name of keeping things calm. I had dressed my weakness up as patience and called it kindness. My father Harold would never have allowed this to happen. He would have spotted the rot eating through the foundation years before it spread, and he would have ripped it out. He wouldn't have slapped paint over it and looked away. The new phone buzzed against the desk, and the sound made me flinch. I grabbed it. Daly. Only 50 minutes had gone by. Mr. Daly. I picked up, my throat dry. Leonard, he said. That move from Mr. Caldwell to my first name told me we were operating on different terms now. You were right to call, and you called just in time. I dropped into the chair. What did you find? I reached the bank's fraud department using your authorization, Daly said, his voice stripped down to pure business. At 10:45 this morning, about 10 minutes after Maureen left you stranded on the highway, a wire transfer request was pushed through from your joint brokerage account. My blood went cold. How much? $250,000, Daly said. The air went out of me. The $100,000, a smokescreen. The real transfer, Daly continued, was routed to a newly formed LLC PF Holdings. I'm pulling the records now, but I'd stake my license on it, tracing back to your son Garrett. I thought of Tara's manufactured alarm. We're worried sick. They weren't worried about anything. They were sitting at a computer logged into my accounts, trying to strip out $250,000. They needed me stranded and rattled so I wouldn't catch the alert on my real phone. Did it clear? I whispered. No, Daly said, and beneath the clipped tone I could hear the satisfaction. My call to the fraud department landed while the transfer was still sitting in final review. It was flagged and frozen along with every shared asset you hold. They missed their window, Leonard. By about 30 minutes, I sank back, a surge of adrenaline leaving me lightheaded. We had cut them off. But there's more, Daly said, his voice going grim. The bank had already been on edge. The reason Maureen and Garrett were sitting down with Hale Drummond last week, it wasn't purely about a default. Not exactly. It was about leverage. Garrett's personal finances are a wreck. He's underwater. Apparently, they were trying to arrange a substantial new loan, using your entire commercial real estate portfolio as collateral. I set the phone down. I stood there in the stillness of that enormous suite, but my mind was anything but still. It was running hard. Daly's words kept looping back, using your entire portfolio as collateral. This wasn't some hot-headed impulse. This wasn't Maureen having a rough day. This was a calculated, deliberate assault. This was a siege. The blow-up in the car, her screaming, throwing me out at the roadside, all of it misdirection. A coordinated move designed to pull me off the board, to make me disappear during the exact hours they needed. to gut my life's work. I looked at my hands. The hands that had assembled that portfolio, signed those blueprints, poured that concrete. Dorothea had been right. I had been a doormat. But even a doormat shaken hard enough remembers what it was built for. I picked up the phone and dialed Daly back. "I'm at the Piedmont Reserve Club." "Where are you?" "5 blocks from you," he said. "We need a war room," I told him. "Now. Bring everything you have on my family. And let Mrs. Langford know I'm coming down." "No need, Leonard." Daly's voice came back, and something in it had shifted warmer, closer. "We're already here. Mrs. Langford is waiting for you in the library downstairs." Of course she was. 10 steps ahead, as always. The library at the Piedmont Reserve Club felt like it belonged to a different era entirely. Dark walnut shelves stretched up to a ceiling painted with constellations. The room smelled of old leather and aged paper. Dorothea was seated near an unlit fireplace, a cup of tea sending up a thin curl of steam beside her. Daly stood at the window, a slim briefcase in his hand. "You look better," Dorothea said as I came through the door. "Anger suits you. It's the Caldwell blood finally waking up. Sit down." I walked past the chair and went straight to the fireplace. They tried to leverage my real estate, my entire portfolio, while I was sitting out on the highway. "I told you," Dorothea said simply and without satisfaction. Desperate prey. Daly stepped forward and opened his briefcase. "Leonard, the freeze is in place. Your assets are secure for the moment. But this is only the opening move. The freeze won't hold indefinitely. Your wife, Maureen, has spousal rights. She can and will take this to court. She'll claim you're unstable, erratic. Her walking out on you will be reframed as you storming off in a senile rage." So she was right. I said it, and the thought turned my stomach. When she called me a clueless old man, she was already building the narrative. "Precisely," Daly said. "We can't just hold the line. We have to push forward. We need to establish intent to defraud. We need to understand why. What is this pit they keep throwing money into?" I walked them through what I remembered, fragments, pieces. Garrett and Maureen with their heads together in the kitchen, voices low. Tara's complaints about being broke. The push 4 months back to get me to liquidate the properties. Daly moved slowly around the room. "It all tracks. They went after the assets through the estate planning lie, first the legal route. You shut that down. So they moved to Plan B and went after the portfolio directly. Drummond must have told them they needed either your signature or proof you weren't capable of giving it." The cold moved through me again. The high-risk manager. Drummond. He was part of it. Likely, Daly said. But that's a separate battle. Right now, something else is nagging at me. I looked at him. "What it seems straightforward enough. They're broke, and they're stealing." "No," Daly said, and he stopped moving. He looked at me steadily, eyes sharp. "Here is what I can't make fit. Why the confrontation in the car to begin with? Why the demand for $100,000 in cash from you specifically?" I shook my head. "I don't follow. They were desperate for money, but they were already pushing the $250,000 wire transfer." Daly pressed. "They were already trying to leverage millions in real estate. If you're already positioned to steal $1 million, why blow everything up over $100,000? It's messed. It doesn't track." He was right. If they were already moving to drain my accounts, why manufacture that particular fight? I pushed myself to think it through. Maybe the $100,000 was for Garrett personally, walking around money while Maureen handled the larger transfer. No. Dorothea's voice broke through. She hadn't said a word in 10 minutes. "Mr. Daly is correct. Those two amounts are pointed at two completely different things. We both turned toward her. She struck her cane once against the floor. The $250,000 wire transfer that was for them. That was Maureen's cut. The real estate leverage that was tied to the high-risk account. That was the bank's piece. But $100,000 in cash. She let it sit there in the air. Cash leaves no trail. Cash has no name on it. Cash is the currency of people who cannot afford to be near a bank. Daly's color drained. My God, you think he owes someone outside the system, someone dangerous? A loan shark, I said barely above a whisper. Garrett, my own son. Dorothea turned her unseeing eyes toward me. The bank is a problem you negotiate. But this other debt, the $100,000 in cash, that is the one driving their real terror. That is the one that made removing you today non-negotiable, whatever the cost. He isn't only in trouble with the bank, Leonard. He's in trouble with dangerous people. Daly snapped his briefcase shut. I'm bringing in a private investigator. Tonight. We need eyes on Garrett. We need to know every person he's sitting down with. And we need to tear into his personal finances separately from yours. This has moved beyond protecting your money. We may be protecting your life. The next 24 hours were the longest I had ever endured. I stayed up in the suite at the Piedmont Reserve Club. I ordered room service, pork chops, eggs, real coffee, food that barely registered on my tongue. I was a prisoner in a velvet cage, just waiting. No phone to reach anyone I actually trusted. No wallet. Completely dependent on Dorothea and the people around her. For the first time in my life, I was truly without power, exactly as Maureen had planned it. But the anger kept my mind cutting clean. The anger was a shield. Daly had told me to stay put while his people worked. He had forensic accountants, legal aides, a small army I'd had no idea existed. He was, as Dorothea had put it, a lion tamer, and my family were the rogue animals that needed taming. The phone rang late the following afternoon. It was Daly. His voice was tight and clipped. Leonard, though I have the first report back from my accountants. I settled into the chair at the heavy desk pen, ready a sheet of the club's thick stationery in front of me. Go ahead. First, he said, the small fires. We ran a full credit check going back 5 years. Your wife Maureen has not been sitting still. What do you mean? I mean separate from your joint accounts. She has opened 3 high-limit credit cards in your name. An Amex Platinum, a Visa Signature, and a Chase Sapphire Reserve. She used your social security number, which she obviously has access to, and listed her own mailing address, a P.O. box, as the billing destination. You never saw a single statement. A wave of nausea hit me. How much? As of this morning, Daly said, and I heard him turn a page. The combined outstanding balance across those 3 cards is $84,622.40. $84,000 in secret credit card debt. I thought of every time in the past year Maureen had talked about cutting back. All those times she claimed she was shopping discount, watching the budget. Every word of it a lie. She had been funding her life by stealing my identity. The charges Leonard Daly went on are exactly what you'd expect. Spas, designer handbags, lunches at the St. Regis Atlanta. She was bleeding you at the margins methodically, even while the larger theft was being assembled. I shut my eyes. The woman who had slept beside me for 46 years. A common thief. All right, I said. My voice stripped bare. All right. What about Garrett? Pause. That's where it gets complicated, Daly said. On paper, his firm, Garrett Caldwell Wealth Solutions. The name alone felt like a fist to the jaw. Caldwell. He had put my father's name on the door of whatever this was. It looks legitimate on the surface, Daly continued. Registered LLC professional office downtown, a polished website, actual clients. We ran background checks on his top 10, mostly solid local business owners, retirees. The whole operation reads clean, but I said, I could hear it coming. There's always a but. You found something. I found what's missing, Daly said. His declared income, the firm's revenue, it's substantial. Right in line with what you suspected, well over $300,000 a year. His lifestyle, pricey as it is, should be manageable on that. The house in Buckhead, the cars, the club memberships, it's a stretch, but not an impossible one. None of that explains the panic. None of it explains the $84,000 in hidden debt racked up by your wife. It doesn't explain the high-risk meeting with Drummond. And it sure doesn't explain the need for $100,000 in untraceable cash. I tightened my grip on the pen. So where is the money going, Daly? If he's pulling in that kind of income, where is it disappearing to? That's what my team has been buried in for the last 12 hours, Daly said. We went through his personal accounts, his mortgage, car payments, all routine. But then we turned up the other transfers, the ones that don't belong. Go ahead. Regular transfers, Leonard and large. $10,000 here, $20,000 there, like clockwork every single week. They aren't heading to a bank. They aren't going to any brokerage account. They're flowing into a series of offshore accounts. Accounts registered to online casinos operating out of Malta and Curaçao. He isn't just in debt. He's a gambler. A serious one. I heard the pieces settle into place. The investment, the tech startup story, all fabricated. But even that isn't the worst of it, Daly said, and his voice had gone grim. It isn't only the casinos. We found another set of payments larger still. $50,000 last month alone, wired to a holding company that doesn't exist on any public record. No website. No filings. A ghost. A loan shark, I said, barely a whisper. Exactly, Daly said. He isn't just gambling. He's lost badly. He has dug himself into a hole with people far more dangerous than any bank. The $100,000 in cash, it wasn't tied to an investment. It was a payment. One he clearly hadn't been able to make. I set the phone down. The pen in my hand had snapped clean in two. I sat staring at the ink spreading across the expensive club stationery. Loan shark. My son. The boy I taught to ride a bike. The boy I took to baseball games. My Garrett. He was indebted to criminals. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the armchair by the window, the city lights smearing into color through the glass. The pork chops I'd eaten hours earlier sat in my gut like stone. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Garrett's face, not the 42-year-old man, but the 6-year-old boy holding up a drawing, eyes bright and proud. Look, Daddy, I made this for you. Where did I go wrong? When did this begin rotting? Was it something I did? Did I hand him everything so easily that he never learned to fall? Never learned what it meant to be a man? The questions kept circling my mind, a vulture's carousel with no landing, and I had no answers for any of them. The phone rang again the following morning. Daly. His voice had changed. The professional precision was gone. He sounded worn, heavy. Leonard, he said, I need to ask you to sit down. I was already in the chair. What is it now? More gambling debts. I wish it were that manageable, Daly said. I'm deeply sorry. It's worse. Just say it, son. I'm well past the point of being shocked. No, Daly said quietly. I don't think you are. I called in a favor, Leonard. A significant one. I have a contact, a senior partner at the firm where Garrett works. I reached him last night. I framed it as a hypothetical. A wealthy client's son, erratic financial behavior, large offshore transfers. My contact didn't need the hypothetical to go very far. He recognized the name Garrett Caldwell immediately. I dug my hands into the armrests. What did he say about Garrett? He isn't just a gambler, Leonard. He's a thief. He hasn't only been losing his own money. He's been losing his client's money. The breath stopped in my chest. What? No, He's been under a confidential internal investigation for the past 2 months, Leonard. He was caught red-handed. Embezzling. That word. Embezzlement. A legal term, a criminal one. Something that belonged in a courtroom, not in a sentence about my family. How I managed. My source says Garrett was careful about it. He built ghost client profiles, fabricated statements. He skimmed money from his older, less attentive clients, retirees mostly, and funneled it through those fake accounts. From there, it was wired straight to his offshore gambling platforms. Oh, God. I said, both hands pressing against my face. How much? The internal audit is still running, Daly said. But my source puts the hole they've uncovered so far at just over $5 million. $5 million. I couldn't form a word. My mind simply stopped. 5 million. Daly pressed on his voice, carrying the silence forward. This is the real story, Leonard. This is the black hole. The gambling wasn't the root of it. It was the symptom. He was chasing losses, trying to win back the money he'd already stolen. But every round only dug the hole deeper. The loan shark, the $100,000 in cash, that was almost certainly just interest. A payment to keep someone quiet, someone who had figured it out. It all clicked together now. The desperation, the unraveling panic, Tara pinching pennies while her husband was incinerating $5 million. The meeting with Drummond at the bank, I said, my voice rough. The move to leverage my properties, it wasn't about raising money. It was about replacing money. Exactly, Daly said. He was trying to arrange a massive loan against your real estate, not for an investment, not to settle with a loan shark. He was trying to plug the $5 million hole before the firm's investigation went public. Cover the tracks. Stay out of prison. A cold, terrible clarity settled over me. And the firm, when does the investigation conclude? That's the final piece, Leonard, Daly said. That is the reason Maureen threw you out of the car yesterday. That is why they needed you out of this picture. My source confirmed it. The internal investigation is complete. They are scheduled to present their findings to the board and to the SEC in 5 days. 5 days. They had 5 days to find $5 million. My refusal to hand over the $100,000, it wasn't just a setback. It was the last straw. They had run out of time, and I was their only remaining source. They weren't simply trying to rob me. They were trying to take everything I had ever built and use it as a get-out-of-jail-free card, and they were willing to leave me on the side of a highway to do it. Daly, I said. My voice was shaking, but not from fear. Something else had moved in underneath the fear, a cold iron rage. I need to see my wife. I need to see my son. Leonard, I don't think that's wise. No, I said. I'm not going to confront them. Not yet. I'm going to set a trap. I'm going to find out exactly how deep this rot goes. The phone in my suite buzzed the following morning. Not a call. A message from Daly. It carried a link to a secure video file and 4 words. You need to see this. I tapped the screen. The footage was clearly shot from inside a vehicle, slightly unsteady, aimed across a busy city street. A timestamp in the corner showed it was captured 30 minutes ago. I watched Maureen's Mercedes pull up and lurch to a stop, half on the curb. She stepped out of the driver's side. She looked awful. Her hair, always kept immaculate, was disheveled. The oversized sunglasses she wore weren't a style choice, they were a mask. Then my daughter-in-law, Tara, climbed out of the passenger side. She was lugging a large, heavy-looking handbag. Her handbag. The one I had bought her years back as a welcome to the family gift. Both of them swept their eyes up and down the street, furtive, paranoid, like two people who knew exactly what they were doing and didn't want to be seen doing it. Then they ducked inside a building. The sign above the door was discreet gold lettering pressed into black glass. Peachtree Fine Collateral and Estate Jewels. A pawn shop, an upscale one, but a pawn shop all the same. The investigator Covey must have slipped in behind them because the camera angle shifted. Now it was inside the shop, shot from a lapel, looking over their shoulders toward the glass display counter. I watched my wife and my daughter-in-law. Tara unzipped the heavy bag and began emptying it onto the counter. It wasn't just her jewelry. It was Maureen's, the diamond necklace I had given Maureen for our 40th anniversary. Her mother's pearls, rings, heavy gold bracelets, a pile of gold and diamonds that stood for 46 years of my life, of our life together. They were dumping it on the counter like scrap they'd hauled in off the street. The man behind the glass, an appraiser in a pressed suit, was working through the pieces one by one. Maureen stood with her arms crossed and her foot tapping tight with impatience. Tara was chewing her thumbnail, her eyes cutting toward the door every time it moved. Then Tara reached back into the bag. She pulled out the last item. My heart stopped cold. I would have known it in the dark. It was a Rolex President solid gold. I had bought that watch for Garrett when he finished his MBA. I'd had the back engraved, "To Garrett, your future is what you build. Love, Dad." I still remembered the heft of it when I carried it out of the store. I remembered his face when I put it in his hands. He had actually cried. He had pulled me into a hug and said, "I'll keep this forever, Dad. I'll pass it on to my son one day." And here was his wife, Tara, sliding it across a pawnbroker's counter as if it were a piece of junk. The man picked it up. He turned it over and read the engraving on the back. He looked up at Tara. He must have said something about it because Tara snapped at him. The audio wasn't clean, but her body said everything. "Just give me the money." The pawnbroker gave a small shrug. He punched a few numbers into a calculator. He wrote a figure on a slip of paper and pushed it towards them. Maureen looked at it and immediately shook her head, hard, emphatic, furious. She was arguing, pushing back. She pointed at the diamonds at the watch. She was desperate. Tara put her hand on Maureen's arm, pressing her to accept it and move on. This wasn't settling a credit card balance. This was scraping the bottom of an empty barrel. This was the cash for the loan shark. This was the $100,000 Dorothea had described. They were selling my gifts, my history, our grandchildren's inheritance to pay off dangerous people. The video closed on the man counting out thick bricks of cash. Maureen and Tara shoved the money into the designer handbag, the one thing they hadn't put on the counter, and rushed out. I sat back. The phone sat heavy in my hand. I kept thinking about that engraved watch. Your future is what you build. My son had built nothing. He had only learned to dismantle things, and his wife and my wife were his wrecking crew. They were in it together, fully, knowingly complicit. This made it certain. The $100,000 demand was no arbitrary number. It was a specific, urgent payment, and they were ready to liquidate every piece of our shared history to make it. A grim satisfaction settled in me. They were desperate, and desperate people get sloppy. The phone buzzed. A text from Daly. "The accountants have finished. Call me. The $5 million hole is confirmed." But Covey just tailed Garrett. He's not with his wife. He's somewhere else, and he's not alone. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Daly. Covey just followed Garrett. different location. And he's not alone. A new link appeared. Live feed. I held for just a fraction of a second, then tapped it. My screen opened onto a new video streaming live from the investigator's car. The view pushed through a chain-link fence across a wide, empty parking lot behind a gutted warehouse. Weeds had cracked through the asphalt. It was the kind of industrial dead zone you find behind old rail yards. Garrett's car, his silver Audi, sat alone in the middle of the lot. He was leaning against the hood, and even at that distance I could see the terror on him. He was rubbing his hands together, pacing a tight little circle. He looked like a cornered animal with nowhere left to go. I watched, not breathing. About a minute later, a black Suburban with tinted windows so dark they looked like polished obsidian rolled into the lot. It didn't rush. It moved slow and deliberate the way something moves when it doesn't need to hurry. It pulled up directly in front of Garrett's car, cutting off any route out. Garrett's hands went up immediately, the universal gesture of a man trying to show he's not a threat. "I have it. I have it." His voice came through the investigator's microphone, thin and reedy. The doors of the Suburban swung open. 2 men stepped out. These were not bankers. One was enormous, built like a refrigerator-shaved head neck, as thick as my thigh. The other was smaller, older, dressed in an expensive silk shirt that did nothing to conceal the coiled tension underneath. He was the one who ran things. He walked straight up to Garrett, who visibly shrank where he stood. "You're late, Garrett." The smaller man's voice was almost conversational, which made it more frightening than shouting. "We said noon. What time is it, Bruno?" The big man grunted. 2:30. 2:30, the man in the silk shirt repeated, as if he were noting the time for a meeting agenda. "You're 2.5 hours late and you're short." "No, no!" Garrett said, his voice breaking. He fumbled with a briefcase I hadn't noticed before. I got most of it. It's $85,000 from my wife. She sold her jewelry, all of it. I'll have the rest by tomorrow. I swear." The man in the silk shirt just looked at him. He didn't blink. 85. You promised me 100 as a down payment on the $500,000 you owe me this week. I know. Just listen. Garrett's voice was fraying at the edges. I have a new plan. A better one. My father, the old man I told you about, he has millions in assets. Commercial real estate. We have a plan to get control of it. All of it. It's already in motion. I can get you everything. Not just the $500,000. I can get you 10 million. 20. We just need a little more time. I watched my son standing in a desolate parking lot trying to trade my entire life's work, my father's legacy, to a pair of violent criminals. The man in the silk shirt was quiet for a long moment. He tilted his head slowly. Your father, the old builder, the one you were supposed to get the money from yesterday. The one who, what was it you said? He's a clueless old man, it's fine. He paused. Doesn't seem fine, Garrett. Seems to me your old man is sharper than you are. No, he's stubborn. But we're handling it. My mother, she's handling it. She's handling it. The man nodded once. I don't care about your mother. I don't care about your father. I care about my money. He closed the distance between them, stepping directly into Garrett's space. You stole from your clients, Garrett. That's your business. But then you lost that stolen money to my associates. That makes it my business. I gave you the opportunity to make it right. Pay me back with interest. And you're late, and you're short. Please, Garrett whispered. He was crying now. Please, just a few more days. The bigger man, Bruno, moved forward. He said, please. And then, without any warning, he drove both hands into Garrett's chest and shoved him hard. My son went stumbling backward over his own feet and hit the filthy asphalt. The briefcase burst open and stacks of cash scattered across the ground. I sat frozen in the armchair of that luxury suite, watching my son lying on the pavement whimpering. The man in the silk shirt walked over unhurried. He didn't raise his voice. He crouched down low, bringing himself level with Garrett's face. He picked up one of the loose bundles of bills. "You have 48 hours, Garrett," he said, his voice almost gentle. "Not for this. For everything. The full $500,000. Not your assets? Not your promises? My money in my hand. 48 hours. He rose to his feet. "Because if you don't," he continued, brushing the dust from his trousers, "I'm not just coming for you. I'm going to come for your pretty wife, Tara. And I'm going to come for your mother, Maureen." He leaned in one final time. "And just for the fun of it, I'm going to come for your clueless old man, too. Do you understand me?" Garrett, sobbing on the ground, nodded in fast, desperate jerks. "Yes. Yes. What I'm about to share changed everything I thought I understood about the people closest to me. Before I get there, I want to ask you something. If you discovered that someone you had trusted completely had been quietly working against you, would you confront them the moment you knew, or would you wait and build your case in silence? Okay, please." The two men didn't bother gathering the rest of the scattered cash. They simply turned, walked back to the Suburban, climbed in, and rolled away, leaving my son alone in the middle of that lot, a broken, pathetic heap surrounded by the money he had sold his mother's pearls to scrape together. The video cut out. I sat there staring at a blank screen for a long, long time. The image of my son Garrett sobbing on the asphalt. It should have shattered me. Maybe some part of it did. But that part was buried under something colder, harder, heavier: rage. He hadn't just been crying out of fear. He had been bargaining. He had put me and everything I had ever built on the table to save his own skin. "I can get you 10 million, 20, 48 hours. That was his clock. He was out of moves. He had come up short on the cash from Maureen's jewelry sale. He had failed to pry the $100,000 out of me. He was a cornered rat, and a cornered rat will chew through anything to get free. I turned his words over in my mind. My mother, she's handling it. They were working this together. He was the one drowning in debt, but she was the one maneuvering for control of the assets. Both of them were coming for me. They needed my money, my signature, my cooperation, and they needed it right now. I glanced at the clock. Nearly 5:00 p.m. They'd be unraveling Garrett, having dragged himself home to Maureen, defeated and terrified. The two of them scrambling to identify their next play. It was time to hand them one. I drew a slow breath. I thought about my father, Harold. He was a lion. I thought about Dorothea. She was a fortress. And I thought about Leonard Caldwell, the clueless old man. It was time to inhabit the role they had already written for me. I dialed Maureen's number from the encrypted phone. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice was nothing like the fury in the car. It was taut, brittle, distracted. "Hello, hello." I let a beat pass. Then I exhaled a small, shaky, defeated little sound. "Maureen, it's Leonard." Her tone sharpened instantly. Not with relief, with the scent of opportunity. "Leonard, where are you?" "My God, we've been. Tara said you were at Ned's. We called. He's been dead for 10 years. We thought, where are you?" I let the silence stretch a moment longer. Then I let my voice crack. I got confused, Maureen. I'm at a small hotel near the airport. I used my emergency credit card. I didn't have one. That was a lie calibrated to make me sound exactly as lost and frail as they believed I was. Maureen, I'm so tired, and I'm cold. A hotel. I caught the muffled sound of a hand going over the receiver, frantic whispers being exchanged with Garrett in the background. I could almost make out his voice. Is he okay? Does he know? Ask him about the money. She came back on the line, her voice wrapped in a thick, cloying warmth that made me want to put the phone through the wall. Oh, Leonard. Darling. You must be completely worn out. Why didn't you call? We were out of our minds with worry. I was ashamed, I said quietly. I let my voice catch. You were right. I'm just an old man. I don't understand these things. I was stubborn. I'm so sorry, Maureen. I'm scared. That was the hook in the water. I heard a sharp intake of breath on her end. Oh, Leonard. It's okay. We were just upset. We can put this right. Garrett, I said, is he there? Is he all right? I was so worried about him. About the money. He's right here, Leonard, she said, her voice bright and false as a painted smile. A rustle, and then Garrett's voice, equally hollow, equally rehearsed. Dad, are you okay? We were so worried. I'm so sorry, son, I said, keeping the quaver in my voice. I was wrong. I was wrong about all of it. I want to help. I'll give you the money. The $100,000. Whatever you need. I'll sign whatever you need me to sign. I just want to come home. Please. I just want this to be over. Please, Maureen. Please come and get me. I let that hang in the air. Silence. And then I heard it. Not loud, but unmistakable. It was Garrett. Not crying, not worried. A short, sharp whoop, the sound of a man who cannot contain his relief. Yes, I heard him hiss. I told you, Mom. I told you he'd break. Maureen came back on the line. Her voice was shaking, but not from worry. It trembled with barely contained triumph. Oh, Leonard, thank God. Thank God you've come to your senses. We're so relieved. Of course you can come home. We love you. We were just trying to help you see reason. I understand now, I whispered. I'll sign the papers for the investment. I'll sign. That's wonderful, Leonard. That's just wonderful. Listen, she said, her voice pivoting to something crisp and efficient. We can't come to you right now. We have a meeting, but to make it all legal, for the transfer, so Garrett can get the funds right away. Can you meet us tomorrow? Meet? Where should I meet you? At our lawyer's office, she said. Mr. Wyndham, 10:00 in the morning. We'll sign the transfer documents. Just a simple formality. And then it's all over. Everything goes back to the way it was. We can be a family again. Our lawyer's office. Transfer documents. Everything goes back to normal. Yes, I said, letting the shake into my voice. Yes, all right. 10:00, I'll be there. We're so proud of you, Leonard, she said. You're doing the right thing. I put the phone down. I sat in the stillness of that room. The mask of the clueless old man slipped away. I turned the phone over in my hand. They hadn't just taken the bait. They had swallowed it whole, hook, line, and sinker. And tomorrow at 10:00, I was going to start pulling the line in. I set the phone on the table, the sound of Garrett's strangled yes still ringing in my ears. They were certain they had me. They pictured the old man, broken and frightened, crawling back to them with his wallet open. They thought I was coming to surrender. I dialed Daly immediately. He picked up on the first ring. Daly, it's Leonard. The trap is set. Tell me, he said. They took it, all of it. They want me at their lawyer's office tomorrow at 10:00 a.m. to sign the transfer papers. They think I'm coming to hand over the $100,000. A pause followed. Not long, but waited. Whose office Leonard A. lawyer named Wyndham, I said. Maureen called him our lawyer Wyndham and Associates. A second pause. Longer. Prescott Wyndham Daly said. The brisk, professional rhythm in his voice had gone quiet. When it came back, it was slower, more careful. That's right, I said. Do you know him? I know of him, Daly said. And Leonard, that is a problem. My gut tightened. The same cold premonition I had felt in the car before Maureen threw me out. A problem, how is he not capable? Oh, he's very capable, Daly said, his voice low. The finest in the city at his particular specialty. But his specialty has nothing to do with finance. Leonard, why would they need Prescott Wyndham simply to oversee a wire transfer? You don't call in a lion to swat a fly. I wasn't following. What are you saying exactly? That they need this formalized? I don't know. No, Daly said. And neither do you. You don't summon a $20,000 a day litigator to notarize a transaction. It makes no sense. Garrett is 5 days from an SEC investigation. He's 48 hours from having his knees broken by dangerous people. They are not taking you to that office to politely ask you to sign. They're taking you there to make certain you do. A new and colder thought started to form. What does Wyndham specialize in daily? I'm pulling up his firm's public profile right now, Daly said. I heard the rapid, quiet tapping of a keyboard. I need to be sure. Leonard, this is wait. Give me 30 minutes. I have to make some calls. Don't go anywhere. Don't reach out to them again. I will call you back on this phone. The line went dead. 30 minutes. I stood and moved to the window of the suite. A lion to swat a fly. What did that mean? What documents were they actually planning to put in front of me? I turned it over and over. Tara's call, we thought, where are you? We're so worried. And Maureen just now. Thank God you've come to your senses. They weren't only manipulating me. They were constructing something. Assembling a version of events. The portrait of a muddled, erratic 70-year-old man who had a minor argument and simply wandered away. A man who believed a friend dead for 10 years was still reachable by phone. A man who was sentimental and stubborn and easily confused. A man who was the phone on the desk rang and nearly stopped my heart. It was Daly. Not even 20 minutes had gone by. I grabbed it. Daly! His voice was pure ice. Leonard. I was wrong, my pulse hammered. Wrong about what? He's not a lion, Daly said. He's a vulture. I just got off the phone with an old colleague at the Bar Association. I've gone through his case history. Prescott Wyndham is not a financial lawyer. He has no background whatsoever in wealth management. He's not a criminal attorney. He's not a real estate lawyer. Then what is he? I demanded. He's a probate litigator, Leonard. The single most ruthless, most successful specialist in the state of Georgia for contested guardianships and involuntary competency hearings. I had to grab the edge of the desk to keep myself upright. The phone felt slick in my palm. Guardianship. You mean the kind for elderly people, for people no longer considered capable of handling their own affairs. Leonard Daly's voice was sharp, cutting through the shock. He is the attorney you hire when you want to force a family member into a facility and seize legal control over their entire estate. He's the man you bring in when you need to prove before a judge that someone is senile, confused, paranoid, incompetent. The pieces crashed together in my mind like a wrecking ball. The screaming fight being dumped on the roadside without a phone or a dollar. Tara's call engineering the confusion about my dead friend. All of it their concern, and then my own phone call minutes ago. A rattled, frightened old man begging to come home and promising to sign anything. My God, I whispered. They're not trying to persuade me. They're trying to have me declared incompetent. It's worse than that. Leonard Daly said, his voice tight. Wyndham doesn't lose. He's notorious for deploying expert witnesses, hired doctors who will appear in court and testify for a fee that a patient is a danger to himself and his assets. They are not bringing you there to sign a simple transfer document. They are bringing you to an ambush. There will be a doctor in that room. There will be a notary. They will attempt to trick you into signing a voluntary conservatorship. And the instant you refuse, the instant you raise your voice, the instant you accuse them of anything, your anger, your suspicion, that becomes their primary exhibit. They will use it to file an emergency petition with a judge to have you declared incompetent before the day is out. The full shape of it unfolded in my mind, cold and complete. They wouldn't stop at the $100,000, not the $250,000. They wanted everything. My entire commercial real estate portfolio. They'd leverage it, pay back the $5 million Garrett had stolen, settle with the loan sharks, and they would leave me, Leonard Caldwell, locked inside a care facility, legally erased with my own signature on a document attesting that I was out of my mind. They're trying to bury me alive, I said. Yes, Daly replied. But they made one critical mistake. They believed you were a clueless old man. They had no idea you were Harold Caldwell's son, and they certainly had no idea you were my client. 10:00 a.m. tomorrow. We'll be in position. We're not simply going to stop them, Leonard. We are going to take them apart. I had spent the last of my cash on a cab. I did not put on the new clothes I had purchased. Instead, I went back to the stained slacks and the worn shirt I had been living in for 3 days. I didn't shave. I splashed cold water on my face and didn't bother drying it, letting the chill cling to my skin. I made a point of walking the 6 blocks to the cab stand in the morning cold. By the time I walked into that downtown high-rise, I was the precise image of the man they were expecting. A 70-year-old who looked like he had been sleeping, rough, red-eyed, shivering, and completely caved in. The building was polished steel and hushed expensive glass all the way to the ceiling. The lobby carried the smell of money. I dragged my feet across the floor the way I used to coming off a muddy job site. The security guard behind the front desk looked me over with unconcealed contempt, his gaze dropping to the dirty duffel bag in my hand. He had me figured for a delivery man who'd taken a wrong turn. I rode the elevator to the 27th floor. The doors opened onto a quiet, gray-carpeted reception area. Wyndham and Associates. I pushed through the heavy glass door. I could already hear their voices from the corridor before I saw a single face. They were gathered in a large conference room just off the entrance door, wide open. All of them, Maureen Garrett and Tara, seated around a vast, dark wood table that looked as though it had been carved from the trunk of a single enormous tree. Maureen spotted me first. Her hand flew to her mouth. It was a flawless performance, shock and pity served together. Oh, Leonard. Leonard, my God, just look at you. She came toward me with her arms open, her expensive perfume enveloping me as she pulled me close. Her body was rigid. She was ice beneath it. Oh, darling, you look just awful. She breathed, her voice thick with manufactured tears. You're absolutely frozen. Where on earth have you been? What happened to you? Garrett and Tara moved in right behind her, their faces arranged in matching masks of practiced worry. Dad. Garrett said, his voice laden with false heaviness. He placed a hand on my shoulder, the grip a fraction too firm. Dad, we were out of our minds. We've been up all night. Tara was beside herself. Why didn't you just come home? Tara, right on cue, pressed a tissue to her bone-dry eyes. Thank God you're safe, Leonard. We were so frightened. We thought you were lost. Lost. That was the word. The word they had clearly rehearsed. The word they intended to use later in a courtroom. Lost, confused, wandering. I let my shoulders cave forward. I let my hands shake. I swept my eyes around the room with a vacant, unfocused expression. I'm sorry, I mumbled, letting my voice go thin and unsteady. I got confused. I don't know. I just want this to be finished. I'll sign the papers. I'll sign whatever you need. For Garrett. For the family. Of course, Leonard. Of course. A new voice, smooth and assured as polished marble, cut cleanly through the family tableau. A man in an immaculate charcoal pinstripe suit stepped forward from the far end of the room. He was tall, lean, and had the bearing not of a lawyer, but of an undertaker at a very expensive firm. This was Prescott Wyndham. "It's a genuine pleasure to meet you at last, Mr. Caldwell," he said. He didn't extend his hand. He simply gestured to the chair at the head of the table. "I'm Prescott Wyndham. I'm here simply to facilitate this transition on behalf of your family." I just want to sign the transfer," I said, looking past him toward Garrett. "For the investment, the money." "Absolutely," Wyndham said, steering me into the heavy leather chair at the table's head. "And we will absolutely get there. Every bit of it. But first, given your recent difficulties, the family was understandably very concerned. They felt strongly that we should have someone present purely to ensure you're comfortable, to confirm that you fully understand the process. For your protection, naturally." I looked up at him, playing the muddled old man to the hilt. "Protection? What protection? I don't need protecting." Wyndham smiled. It was a narrow, reptilian expression that stopped well short of his eyes. "Simply a formality, Leonard. A precaution." He gestured toward a man who had been sitting so quietly in the corner of the room that I had walked right past him without registering his presence. He was older, silver-haired, with a face engineered for sympathy and trust. A leather briefcase rested across his knees. "This gentleman," Wyndham said, his voice lacquered with reassurance, "is Dr. Farrow. He's a specialist in geriatric cognitive health. He's here for a brief conversation, just to get a sense of how you're doing. A simple assessment, Leonard. Nothing to be concerned about." I looked at the doctor. I looked at Maureen's encouraging, solicitous nod. I looked at Garrett, who was practically vibrating with barely suppressed anticipation, one knee bouncing rapidly beneath the table. The trap had been set. The vultures had taken their places, and I was sitting in the center of it. Wyndham slid a thick sheaf of documents across the polished surface. The top page bristled with bright yellow "Sign Here" tabs. He tapped the first one with a manicured finger. "Here we are, Leonard. Just a straightforward authorization. This simply gives Garrett temporary authority, a power of attorney, to manage your accounts while you're recovering, just to give you some relief while you're not feeling yourself. Sign here, and here, and here." Garrett slid the stack closer to me, his hand resting near mine, performing the role of the attentive, supportive son. "It's just to help with the investment, Dad. The way you promised. You're doing the right thing. We're all here for you." I sat with my hands trembling. I made them tremble. I stared down at the pages, letting my eyes drift slightly out of focus, as though the text were giving me trouble. It's a lot of pages," I said, my voice thin. "A lot of pages, just for a transfer." Wyndham produced a small, condescending laugh. "It's all standard language, Leonard. Boilerplate. Very routine. You only need your signature at the bottom. We can read every word aloud if that helps, but I assure you it's quite dry." "No." I placed one finger on the heading of the first page. I made a show of tracing the letters slowly, as though I were sounding them out one by one. P. Petition. Petition for voluntary guardianship of the person and estate. That's what the heading read. I raised my eyes from the page. The bewilderment on my face was pure theater, but I leveled it at every one of them like a weapon. Maureen. This isn't a transfer document. Guardianship. I knew that word. It's what they did to my Uncle Ned when his mind gave out and they moved him into a facility. Nobody in that room breathed. Garrett's warm, encouraging smile cracked apart. Tara, who'd had her nose buried in her phone, whipped her gaze up, sharp eyes going wide. Maureen's assembled expression of concern buckled, and the cold panic underneath showed through. Mr. Wyndham recovered first. That professional smile clicked back like a switch thrown. Leonard guardianship is purely a legal term. It's the framework for high-value power of attorney. Functionally, the same thing. A formality. It protects you, protects the estate, and simply gives Garrett the standing to step in. No. The word came out wrapped in a tremor I'd been rehearsing. That's not what this is. I can read. Right here. It says hereby surrenders all financial and medical decision-making permanently. Maureen, permanently. Their signal. Dr. Farrow moved on it instantly, leaning forward, the kind physician's face replaced by something grave and clinical. Mr. Caldwell Leonard. I'm glad you flagged that. It reflects rational thinking, in fact. I had been discussing with Maureen and Garrett some concerns around your recent episodes. Episodes? I glanced around as though searching for something nobody had mentioned. What episodes? There haven't been any. Leonard, darling. Maureen's voice fractured, right on schedule, loaded with a grief she'd clearly rehearsed. Real tears climbed into her eyes. You don't remember, that's the whole problem. You rang Tara's house last night. You were asking about Ned Whitlow. You seemed to believe he was still alive. Leonard, Ned has been dead for 10 years. She turned to the doctor, her face arranged into rehearsed horror. You see what I mean, doctor? He's forgotten entirely. It keeps getting worse. Dr. Farrow gave a slow, solemn nod and scratched something onto his legal pad. Consistent with significant cognitive deterioration. Anterograde amnesia presents exactly this way, fabricated recollections papering over gaps the patient cannot consciously access. And the paranoia. Garrett added, dropping his voice as though the words cost him something. He looked at the doctor with aching sincerity. He's convinced the whole family is robbing him, doctor. Built this elaborate delusion that I was tangled up in something criminal, needed money for illegal reasons. Accused me directly. Dr. Farrow documented this with soft, disapproving sounds. Persecution complex. Predictable at this stage. The patient reframes his loved ones as predators and interprets their genuine concern, this very guardianship, as evidence of malicious intent. Textbook. Mr. Wyndham moved in. And his refusal to provide financial assistance, the $100,000, even to help his only son. Dr. Farrow closed his notepad and fixed me with a look of heavy, practiced pity. That detail troubles me most, Mr. Wyndham. Executive function gone. Judgment catastrophically compromised. A man who withholds help from a son he clearly loves because paranoid thinking has hijacked his reasoning. In my professional opinion, Mr. Caldwell represents a clear and present danger to himself and to his estate. They'd built the perfect trap. Whatever I said, whatever move I made, it fed the machine. Resist paranoia, get angry, deterioration. Look confused, amnesia confirmed. The cage had no door. I studied the document. I studied their faces, hungry, expectant. Maureen, the hollowed-out, grieving wife. Garrett, the exhausted, devoted son, Tara, the stricken daughter, and Wyndham and Farrow, the credentialed professionals assembled to rescue me from myself. So, I said, keeping my voice thin and uncertain, if I refuse to sign you, to go before a judge and tell him I've lost my mind. That reptilian smile spread across Mr. Wyndham's face. Leonard, the word crazy plays no role here. The clinical term is incapable. This isn't punitive, it's protective. Should you decline, yes, we would have no choice but to present Dr. Farrow's assessment to the court. For your own protection, we want what's best for you. What's best for me? I echoed softly. My eyes dropped to the signature line. I wrapped my fingers around the heavy, expensive pen they'd laid out like a prop. Every pair of eyes tracked me. I felt their collective held breath as my hand lifted. Pen over paper. Garrett edged closer, his stare fixed on the nib. Then I set the pen back down. Deliberately, without hurry. I looked up, straight at Garrett, and every trace of trembling stopped. The manufactured quaver, the fear in my eyes, I let it all drop away. Did you honestly believe, I said, my voice gone quiet and cold as iron, that I was just a bewildered old man you could fold up and put away? The shift in the room was like a pressure change before a storm. Maureen's expression locked. Tara's hand froze halfway to her face. Garrett's jaw came unhinged. Dad! Garrett's voice shed its polish entirely. What are you doing? Just sign it. Stop this. Stop what? I leaned forward, palms flat on the table. Acknowledging a fine performance, you all earned it. Maureen, those tears, a masterstroke. Tara, the breathless panic on the phone, genuinely inspired. And Dr. Farrow? I turned to find him in the corner. Understated, controlled, textbook case, a lovely touch. Mr. Wyndham straightened. Mr. Caldwell, if you're feeling agitated, perhaps we should pause. I am not agitated, Mr. Wyndham. I held his gaze. I am enlightened, and I am not signing your fraudulent guardianship petition. Garrett came out of his chair like something released. The furniture screeched across the floor. His mask didn't slip, it was gone in an instant. His face went purple. Sign it, old man. His fist hit the table. Just sign the damn paper. You have no idea what you're throwing away. You're destroying everything. On the contrary, I said, calm as still water. I know exactly what I'm doing, and I know exactly what you've been doing. I know about the 48-hour deadline. I know about the loan sharks. I know about the meeting in the parking lot. I know about Bruno and the man in the silk shirt. The color drained from Garrett's face. He shot a look at Maureen. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. He couldn't finish. Here's what you missed, I said. While all of you were busy staging this little production and casting me as a man too far gone to handle his own affairs, I was working. I've seen video of your wife and your mother carrying my anniversary gifts into a pawn shop. I have footage of you, Garrett, on your knees on the asphalt, begging, sobbing. You were spying on me. A whisper, disbelief bleeding through every syllable. You dumped me out of a moving car with no phone and no money. I said, my voice climbing. You left me there. Did you think I'd just dissolve on that curb? My father raised a fighter. You should have remembered that. You. Garrett was sputtering words, fragmenting. You bastard. You did this. You wrecked everything. I needed that money. You don't understand what you've done. I think I do, I said. You needed the $100,000 to keep those men from collecting. You needed the $250,000 to run a cushion a head start. And you needed me stripped of my rights so you could liquidate my real estate. Yes, ragged, broken. Every bit of the composed professional was gone. What remained was a 42-year-old man in full collapse. Yes, you're right. But you don't know the reason. I know about the gambling, Garrett. The offshore accounts. I know you're buried. Buried! The laugh that tore out of him was awful high and fractured half-sob. You think buried covers it. This was never about a gambling debt. He dug both hands into his hair. It's not my money. It's the client's money. I didn't just lose it through bad trades, I took it. I stole from them. The sobs hit him all at once. It's gone. $5 million gone. I told myself I was borrowing it one quick trade to fix the gambling losses, then put it back before anyone noticed. The trade went the wrong way. All of it. And the audit is in 5 days. If that money isn't back, I'm going to prison for 30 years. Don't you see I have to put it back? He folded forward his forehead, striking the table with a dull, hollow thud. I have to put it back? Silence. Maureen had gone the color of ash, staring at her son. Tara hadn't moved, suspended somewhere between shock and horror. Mr. Wyndham and Dr. Farrow had the look of men who wished they were anywhere else on earth. The confession sat in the room raw and undeniable. It was never about gambling. It was never about a loan shark. Embezzlement. $5 million. Maureen, my wife, did not rush to pull her weeping son into her arms. She rose from her seat. The expression on her face was not that of a grieving mother. It was the face of a general watching her carefully laid operation get torn apart. She fixed her eyes on me, a terrifying glacial fury burning behind them. Leonard, please. Her voice was low and measured. But that was no plea for forgiveness. It was a plea to bring me into the fold. You see what he's been carrying. He made a mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake. But he's our son. She moved toward me, both hands extended. This is why we had to. This is why we needed the guardianship. Not to harm you, but to protect him. He's going to prison, Leonard. Do you understand that your son is going to prison for 30 years unless we do something? We can still fix this. We can raise the money. We can mortgage the properties. You can make this disappear. I looked at her. At my wife of 46 years. She was standing there asking me to make myself an accessory to a $5 million felony, to liquidate everything I had built over a lifetime, to erase a crime, to wipe out a consequence. Save him, Maureen, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Or save yourselves from the humiliation, from the life you'd be forced to give up. You don't understand, Garrett suddenly screamed from across the table. He jerked his head up, his face pale and slicked with tears. He looked at his mother with a wild, broken laugh. Save me? You think this is about saving me? You don't even see it. Do you, Mom? Maureen looked confused. Garrett, what are you talking about? We will get the money. We'll pay it back before the audit. Pay it back! Garrett laughed again, a high, shrill, unraveling sound that sent ice through my veins. He doesn't want the $5 million back. He told me. He told me in the parking lot. I stared at him. What are you talking about? The man in the silk shirt. The criminal you owe. He doesn't care about the $5 million. Garrett was almost feverish now, running on pure, raw terror. He was impressed. Wyndham, the lawyer, was quietly edging toward the door. Dr. Farrow moved that way too. I think we should all sit down, I roared, and both of them went still like they'd hit a wall. I turned back to Garrett. What did you say? He said anyone stupid enough to steal 5 million and lose every cent of it was a liability. He was going to kill me, Garrett whispered. But then I told him about you. Me. Yes, you, the clueless old man. I told him my father ran a massive real estate company. Clean. Decades of clean history. I told him you were old, that you were losing your grip, that we were about to take the wheel. Garrett met my eyes, his own glittering with a sickening, twisted pride. And he smiled, Dad. The man in the silk shirt, he smiled. He said a man who steals 5 million is just stupid. But a man who controls a $30 million commercial real estate portfolio, that man isn't a liability. That man is an opportunity. The last piece of this puzzle crashed into place with a sickening finality. He doesn't want the 5 million back. I said, the truth settling over me. No, Garrett cried. He wants a service. He wants a laundromat. He's got $20 million in dirty cash, Dad. 20 million, and he needs it clean. He gave me a choice. Go to prison for the embezzlement, or use your company, your clean, respected, clueless old man company, to wash it for him. He said if I do it, he'll forget the 5 million. He'll even cut me in. There it was. The real plan. Not to settle a debt. Not to secure a loan. It was to seize full legal control of everything I owned. My signature. My name. They needed the guardianship so Garrett could legally sign away my properties, purchase phantom assets, move ghost money, and transform the Caldwell construction legacy into a front for organized crime. I turned to Maureen. Her face had gone chalk white. She wasn't shocked. She was terrified because the curtain had been ripped back. And you, I said to her, my voice shaking. You knew. You knew about the laundering. Maureen just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, nothing coming out. It was her idea. Garrett suddenly screamed it, jabbing a finger at his mother. The guardianship, it was her idea. When I told her the new plan, she was the one who said he'll never agree to it. We have to make him agree. She was the one who called Wyndham. She was the one who told me to find a doctor. She was the one behind all of it. My son was a thief and a coward, but my wife Maureen, she was the architect. She had been willing to sacrifice me. To have me locked away, declared incompetent. To take everything I had built, everything my father's name stood for, and hand it to a criminal enterprise. All to rescue her precious, worthless son. I looked at the two of them, the two people I had spent my entire life shielding. The two people who were now trying to bury me where I stood. I just stared. My son, a blubbering, terrified thief. My wife, cold, calculating, the one who drew up the blueprint. My daughter-in-law, a useless passenger. And their hired hands, the slick lawyer and the counterfeit doctor, both eyeing the door like a pair of sprinters waiting for the gun. And then I did something I hadn't done in months. I laughed. Not a quiet chuckle, a deep, full, genuine laugh that rose from somewhere in my gut. It was the laugh of a man who had just caught the punchline to the most vicious joke the world had ever told him. It rang through the still expensive conference room. Maureen's head snapped up. What? What's so funny, Leonard? Stop it. This is serious. Oh, it's serious, Maureen, I said, pressing a knuckle to the corner of my eye. It's the most serious thing I've ever faced. And you nearly had me. The plan, it was flawless. The manufactured confusion, the doctor, the guardianship petition, a masterpiece of betrayal. You thought of everything. I pushed back my chair and rose, my voice gone quiet and even. A perfect plan. There's only one problem. Garrett raised his head, face smeared with tears and misery. What? What problem? The problem, I said, looking straight at him, is that you're right. I am a clueless old man. But my father was a lion, and he taught me to always get a second opinion on a bad foundation. As if the moment had been rehearsed, the heavy conference room doors swung open wide. Maureen, Garrett, and Wyndham all flinched and spun around. A man stood in the doorway. No uniform, a $12,000 suit, and a face cut from solid granite. It was Mr. Daly. He stepped into the room with a single measured stride, his eyes moving across every face in the room, reading each one like a ledger. "The problem," Mr. Daly said, his voice filling the space with an authority that Wyndham could only dream of possessing, "is that Mr. Caldwell is not the least bit incompetent. In fact, his mind is sharper than anyone else's in this room." Garrett scrambled to his feet. Who the hell are you?" "This is a private meeting. Get out." "I am Mr. Caldwell's legal counsel," Daly said, not sparing Garrett a glance. His eyes locked on Wyndham. "And I didn't come alone." Daly stepped aside, and through the door came two uniformed Atlanta police officers. Their hands rested easy on their belts, their faces carrying the flat, unhurried look of men stopping in for a routine call. But they weren't the ones who made the room go cold. That was the man who walked in behind them. Tall, impeccably put together late 60s, his face radiating uncut intelligence and authority. "Dr. Farrow?" Daly said, turning toward the fake doctor who was now trying to dissolve into the wall. "I'd like you to meet Dr. Emery Daly, my brother. He also happens to be the chief of psychiatry at Emory University Hospital and the foremost expert on geriatric cognitive assessment in this state. He's very eager to review your credentials." The color fell out of Dr. Farrow's face in one clean drop. He looked at Wyndham. He looked at the officers. He looked at me. And he understood. The trap had never been meant for me. It had been set for them. I watched Dr. Farrow attempt to make himself small, physically contracting in his chair, that practiced sympathetic mask, dissolving into raw, undisguised panic. Dr. Emery Daly crossed the room toward him without hurrying. He didn't raise his voice. He had no reason to. He moved with the unhurried confidence of a man who was already holding every card in the deck. "You're Dr. Farrow." Emery said, his voice smooth and carrying an edge like a scalpel. "I find your assessment quite fascinating. A textbook case, really. You see, I am the chief of psychiatry at Emory University Hospital. I have authored several of the very textbooks you seem to be drawing from. And in all my years in this field, I have never once come across your name. Which medical school did you graduate from?" I. Farrow stammered, his eyes darting frantically toward Wyndham. This is a confidential patient evaluation. I will not be interrogated." "You're not his doctor," Emery said, his tone flat and final. "You're an actor. I ran your name. You're listed with a casting agency. I demand you remove this man." The senior of the two officers who had been standing quietly by the door moved forward a single step. He paid no attention to Emery. His eyes went straight to Wyndham. "Are you Prescott Wyndham?" "Yes, I am, and I demand, you're under arrest." The officer's voice carried no inflection whatsoever. "Conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted elder abuse, and unlawful imprisonment." The second officer moved towards the fake doctor, who looked like the floor was coming up to meet him. You as well, doctor? You have the right to remain silent. I'd strongly recommend you take advantage of that." As the officers began cuffing a sputtering Wyndham and a whimpering Farrow, the room came apart at the seams. Tara let out a small, strangled scream. Maureen shot to her feet, her face stripped bare with disbelief. "What is this, Leonard? Tell them to stop. This is all, it's a misunderstanding." Garrett was trembling, his eyes blown wide with terror. You called the police. You're putting me away after I told you everything." Silence. Mr. Daly's voice cracked through the chaos like a whip. "My client called no one. I made those calls. The moment your attorney, Mr. Wyndham, was confirmed as a specialist in fraudulent conservatorships." Daly moved to the table and opened his leather briefcase with calm, deliberate hands. He glanced back at the officers. "You may want to stay near the door, gentlemen. The charges are about to become considerably more serious." He turned to face Maureen and Garrett. They had nowhere to go. "Maureen," Daly began, his voice measured and courteous, "we haven't had the pleasure of meeting, but I have been studying your recent financial activity with considerable interest." He drew a single sheet from a folder. "This is a bank record. It shows that at 10:45 a.m. on the morning my client was left on the side of a highway, less than 10 minutes after he was abandoned, you attempted an illegal wire transfer of $250,000 from a joint brokerage account." Maureen recoiled as if she'd been splashed with cold water. That was our money. I was consolidating accounts for security." "Consolidating?" Daly lifted one skeptical eyebrow. "Into a brand new LLC, PF Holdings, registered just 3 days ago in your son's name. Mrs. Caldwell, that is not consolidation. That is the legal definition of fraud." He shifted his full attention to Garrett, who looked like he was fighting to keep his stomach down. "And you, Garrett, you've been far busier." He produced a small digital tablet from the briefcase and tapped the screen. My son's voice, thin and desperate, suddenly filled the room. "I can get you 10,020,000. My father, he's a clueless old man." Garrett's face drained of every drop of color. "And this," Daly continued, rotating the tablet so the whole room could see, "is live video footage from my investigator's dashboard camera taken yesterday. We all watched it play out. The black Suburban, the man in the silk shirt, the shove, Garrett, my son, sobbing on the filthy asphalt. This is you, is it not, meeting with known associates of the Antonelli crime syndicate and offering my client's entire real estate portfolio as a vehicle for a $20 million money laundering operation." Daly set the tablet down. "You weren't trying to preserve your father's legacy, Garrett. You were auctioning it off to criminals." This was my moment. I got to my feet slowly. The shivering old man was gone. I was Harold Caldwell's son. I looked at Maureen. The pallor had left her face entirely. In its place was a dark, suffocating rage that had nowhere to go. You did this?" she whispered, her voice laced with venom. "You'd rather watch your own son go to prison than lift a hand to help him." "Help him," I said. My voice was quiet, but it owned the room. "You call this help? You call shredding my name, my reputation, my freedom, you call that help?" I looked at Garrett. "You told those thugs I was a clueless old man. You were half right. I was clueless. Clueless about what my wife had become. Clueless about what my son had turned into." I crossed to Daly, who placed a fresh set of documents in my hand. "Maureen," I said, "when I stepped out of that car, I wasn't just cold. I was free. Free to see everything clearly for the first time. So the very first thing I did, the first call I made, was to have Mr. Daly freeze it all. Every joint account, every credit line, every asset of any kind. You have nothing." "You can't!" she shrieked, her voice finally breaking loose. "The house, our home, my name is on that deed too. You cannot take my home." I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a builder who has just checked the foundation and found it unshakable. "No, Maureen, you're mistaken. The house, the cars, the lake house, none of it sits in our names. I placed everything into an irrevocable trust 30 years ago. My father taught me to guard the foundation against rot. And do you want to know who the sole incontestable trustee is? I pressed a hand to my own chest. This, I said, sliding the final document across the polished table toward her. It landed with a soft, decisive sound. This is not an authorization. This is a 3-day eviction notice. Get out of my house. Garrett just stared at Daly, his mouth hanging half open. Maureen looked from Daly to me, then to her son. Every trace of arrogance had been replaced by a cold, reptilian dread. The FBI, she whispered. You called the feds on your own son, Leonard. What kind of monster does that... A monster. I felt oddly still inside. You tried to have me declared mentally incompetent and locked away so you could run my company as a criminal front. You threw me out of a moving car without a cent to my name. And I'm the monster. Garrett shook his head, a wild, hunted look seizing his face. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the door. You idiot, he hissed at his mother. The feds, you don't understand. These aren't just they're the Antonelli crew. You've killed us. You've killed us both. Actually, Garrett, Daly said, glancing at his watch as though he were waiting on a delayed flight. You have it backwards entirely. We just saved you. The Antonelli crew is, shall we say, otherwise engaged. The FBI was extremely grateful for the detailed intelligence on their operation. They've been working to get inside that organization for years. Daly allowed himself a small smile. And as for your testimony, the conference room doors opened again, not with a dramatic swing this time. They were pushed firmly inward by 2 men and a woman in dark navy suit sidearms, holstered at their hips, FBI credentials clipped to their belts. They didn't look at me. They didn't look at Daly. Their eyes were fixed entirely on my family. Garrett Caldwell. Maureen Caldwell. The lead agent, a tall woman whose face held no expression at all, spoke the names like items on a checklist. It was not a question. Maureen made a sound, a high, thin wail that was equal parts scream and sob. No, Leonard, please. He's your son. You can't allow this. Tell them it's a mistake. A family dispute. She lunged at me, fingers like claws reaching for my shirt, trying to grab hold, to appeal to the clueless old man she believed was still buried in there somewhere. A second agent stepped squarely in front of her, blocking her with his body. Ma'am, you need to calm down. You bastard! She shrieked at me, her face twisted beyond recognition. You did this, you monster! Maureen Caldwell. The lead agent said, her voice carrying the mild boredom of someone doing routine paperwork. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and conspiracy to commit money laundering. She gave a short nod to the second agent who drew Maureen's arms behind her back. The handcuffs clicked sharp, metallic, and absolute. The third agent stepped toward Garrett. My son didn't resist. He didn't say a word. He simply stood there, body slack, eyes completely empty. He looked over at me as they cuffed him. Clueless old man, he whispered. It came out broken. Tara, my daughter-in-law, who had been frozen in the corner the entire time, just standing there watching her entire life detonate around her, her eyes rolled back. She let out a faint gasp, and then folded sideways out of her chair, crumpling onto the expensive Persian rug. No one so much as glanced down. The agents moved them out, Garrett first. Then Maureen, who was no longer screaming, just weeping in those horrible, gulping heaves. My friends, my life, my reputation, it's all finished. The room went quiet all at once. Wyndham and the fake doctor were gone, taken by the local officers. My family was gone, taken by the feds. It was only me, Daly, his brother Emery, and Tara, unconscious on the floor. Emery crouched beside her and checked her pulse. She'll be fine. She only fainted. Daly closed his briefcase. Well, Leonard, that is that. I just nodded, my legs gone suddenly heavy. I had won. I had defended my father's legacy, and I had just sent my wife and my son to prison. The months that followed blurred into headlines and courtrooms. Caldwell family feud, one paper declared. CEO son and wife arrested in multi-million-dollar laundering scheme. My face was on every front page. I was the victim, the patriarch who had been sold out by his own blood. I retreated to the Piedmont Reserve Club and let Daly manage the press. I had to testify. It was the hardest day I have ever lived through. I sat in a federal courtroom under oath and told the truth. I described the car, the phone, the guardianship plot. I played the audio from the investigators recording Garrett sobbing on the asphalt. I held nothing back. Maureen's defense was exactly what you'd expect. She lied. She took the stand and wept, painting me as the villain, a vindictive, domineering old man. She claimed I had set them up, that I was the one with criminal ties, and that when they threatened to go public, I had them put away. She said I was paranoid, losing my mind. She was, as Dorothea had warned me, a breathtaking performer. But then Garrett took the stand. He was thinner. His eyes had gone clear. Every trace of arrogance had been burned off him. He was facing 30 years. His attorney had negotiated a deal. Testify against everyone, his criminal associates, his co-conspirators, in exchange for a lighter sentence. And he delivered. "Were you afraid of your father, Mr. Caldwell?" the prosecutor asked. Garrett looked at me in the front row. Then his eyes moved to his mother. "No," he said, his voice steady. "I wasn't afraid of him. I was afraid of her." He raised his hand and pointed at Maureen. The courtroom drew a sharp breath. She was the one," Garrett said, his voice growing firmer. "When I told her, when I confessed about the embezzlement, I was falling apart. I wanted to run. But she went calm. She said, 'Stop crying. We just have to control your father. He's old. He's sentimental. It will be easy.' The lawyer Wyndham, the fake doctor, all of it was her idea. I just wanted to bury the debt. She wanted the whole empire. It was the final ugly betrayal. The son saving himself by exposing the mother who had tried to save him. I watched Maureen's face fall to pieces. It was over. It was all finally, completely over. Garrett's testimony sealed both their fates. The trial moved quickly. He had admitted to the $5 million embezzlement. Maureen, my wife, was convicted as the chief architect of the guardianship fraud and the money laundering conspiracy. The judge showed her no mercy. He looked directly at Maureen and called her a void of familial loyalty. Garrett, in recognition of his cooperation against the Antonelli crew and his testimony, was sentenced to 20 years. He'll be eligible for parole in 15. Maureen received the same 20 years. Tara, my daughter-in-law, filed for divorce the day they were taken into custody. She moved to claim half of Garrett's assets, but there were no assets, only debt. And the irrevocable trust my father had inspired me to build, the one that held the house and all the real wealth, was airtight. She couldn't lay a finger on it. She walked away with nothing. The first thing I did was put the house on the market. I couldn't bring myself to walk through those rooms again. I sold the Mercedes. I sold the furniture, the art, all the trappings of a life that had turned out to be constructed on lies. I liquidated everything exactly what Maureen had always pushed me to do. But the proceeds were mine. I had lunch with Dorothea Langford. We sat in her garden. "So Leonard," she said, setting down her tea, "you are a very wealthy, very single man. What comes next? Buy an island." I thought about my father, Harold the Lion. I thought about the company he had raised on nothing but his word. "I'm going to build something," I said. "Something that lasts." I took the millions I had recovered and established the Caldwell Foundation. Dorothea, with one of her dry laughs, agreed to sit on the board of directors. Our mission is straightforward. We provide free legal counsel and financial protection for elderly people. We are a shield for those being preyed upon by their own families. We go after the Prescott Wyndhams of the world. We protect the clueless old men. 5 years have passed. I am 75 years old now. I live in a clean, sun-filled condominium in the city. I don't own a flashy car. I walk. I run the foundation. I am at peace. Last week I drove out to the state penitentiary. I went to see my son. Garrett was different. The arrogance, the weakness, the terror gone. Prison had stripped it all away. He was leaner, quieter. The boy had vanished, and there was a man sitting in his place. We sat at a small table with a sheet of thick glass between us. He didn't ask for money. He didn't reach for excuses. We sat together without speaking for a long time. Finally, he said something, his voice rough around the edges. "I'm sorry, Dad. I know it doesn't mean anything. But I am sorry. For the money. For what I did to you. For Mom. For all of it." I looked at my son the thief, my son the convict. I gave a slow nod. "I know you are Garrett." I got to my feet. It was time to go. "Dad, wait." His voice came out small. Will you come back?" I stopped. I turned and looked at him, at the man he was working to become. Not the spoiled boy he used to be. "You have 15 years left, Garrett," I said. 15 years to learn what it means to be a man. My father's grandson. We'll see. I turned and walked away, past the guards, through the heavy gates with their low electric buzz, and out into the wide, bright afternoon. That's where I'll leave it. Out into the afternoon sun and whatever comes next. Looking back now, I won't pretend it didn't cost me. It cost me my marriage, my son's freedom, and a version of my life I had believed in for 46 years. But I believe God doesn't let a man get stripped down that completely without a reason. Sometimes the thing being taken from you was already rotten at the root. What came out of the wreckage, the Caldwell Foundation, the work we do, the people we've protected, that I couldn't have built while I was still comfortable. The hardest season of my life turned out to be the most useful one. If this story taught me anything worth passing on here, it is: protect the foundation before you need to. An irrevocable trust, a second opinion, a document you control, build that now, not after the trouble starts. If someone is rushing you to sign something, slow down. Urgency is the oldest trick in the book. When a person shows you they value your assets more than your dignity, believe them the first time. And if you ever find yourself at the lowest point, abandoned, alone, with nothing in your pocket, don't mistake that for the end. It may be exactly where you needed to land. If this story reached you today, I'd be grateful if you shared it with someone who might need to hear it. An older parent, a friend going through something they won't talk about, anyone who deserves to know they are not alone. Leave a comment below and tell me what part of this stayed with you. And if you haven't already subscribed to Dad Revenge, there are more stories here, and every one of them matters. Thank you for listening all the way through. I mean that. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.